Hey everyone, it's your buddy and pal Karnak here, Star Wars Armada Explained. We're going to be going over the objective Asteroid Tactics. So I've got it blown up big right now. At some point in my video I'll need to shrink it. If you still want to follow along, I recommend going to the Star Wars Armada wiki and going to the Rebellion in the Rim page there and bringing the objective open on your own browser. Alright, let's dive right in. Setup. The second player places all obstacles excluding the station. Special rule. When one of the first player's ships or unique squadrons overlaps an asteroid field, it may recover one of its non-scatter defense tokens. That token must be exhausted. When one of the second player's ships or unique squadrons overlaps an asteroid field, that obstacle has no effect, and that ship or squadron may recover one of its non-scatter defense tokens, or may ready one of its defense tokens. After the start of each squadron phase, after Xenomorphs perform attacks, remove each Xenomorph obstacle from the play area. End of round, the second player places the two Xenomorph obstacles, each touching a different obstacle. So the Xenomorphs are the space slugs that you see in Empire Strikes Back. You get two of these obstacles here. Now, the Vassal module hasn't been updated to represent the new obstacles. Maybe at some point in the future it will. Who knows? I'm not in charge of that. But they're roughly the size of like the small finger-looking asteroid here. So that is what I'm going to be using to represent their models in Vassal. I'll make sure to point them out so you can see. So the Xenomorphs, let's read their special rules. What do these do? They have specific placement rules, and they also resolve different effects on ships and squadrons. I'm going to go ahead and point out early on, these guys will murder squadrons. The ships they don't really get too much in the way of. So when placing the Xenomorphs, they are placed touching other obstacles, and the objective will specify that. But you don't set them out on their own. They're placed touching something else. When a Xenomorph is placed, it cannot overlap ships, other obstacles, or tokens in the play area. If a Xenomorph overlaps squadrons when it is placed, move any overlap squadrons out of the way and place that Xenomorph. Then the player who did not place that Xenomorph places the overlap squadrons, regardless of who owns them, in any position around the Xenomorph, so that they touch it. They then can place those squadrons in any order, but cannot place them outside the play area. So no, you can't chuck player ships off the playmat, okay? Because these are placements, they're not movements. Alright, Xenomorph effect. When a ship overlaps a Xenomorph, that ship suffers 1 damage. At the start of each squadron phase, starting with the second player and alternating, each player chooses one Xenomorph. Each player must choose a different Xenomorph. The player that chose that Xenomorph performs an anti-squadron attack against each squadron at distance 1. A Xenomorph uses the following rules when it performs attacks. Armament. A Xenomorph is treated as if it is a ship with an anti-squadron armament of 3 blue die and is not friendly to any ship or squadron. If a squadron suffers at least 1 damage from the Xenomorph's attack, its activation slider is toggled to the activated side if able. Hull zone. Xenomorph is treated as a ship of 1 hull zone while it's attacking. It has a 360-degree firing arc. And for line of sight, when tracing line of sight to or from the Xenomorph, you trace it from the closest point of the Xenomorph to the opposing squadron, so shortest distance. Attacks that draw a line of sight through the Xenomorph itself or through the obstacle that the Xenomorph is touching are not obstructed. So let's get into this. Let me go ahead and shrink this box down now. Yep. That was not what I wanted to do. Didn't want to move it. There we go. And there we go. Perfect. All right. Then this setup, I'm going to say the Empire is the second player, Rebels are the first player. Let's go through this one step at a time. We're going to start with pretty much the first third of the card and then get to the Xenomorphs. So the second player in the setup places all obstacles, excluding the station. So dust fields, you don't need them. Station, you chuck it, you don't need it. Now, the obstacles I'm using for the stand-in for the Xenomorphs are these obstacles here, the little fingers pointed straight up, and they have objective tokens placed on them, so I know which ones are representing the Xenomorphs. The rest of these are the other obstacle that I picked for representing it. I have turned sideways. Okay, so you have the 3 asteroid fields and the debris field. So keeping in mind that you're going to be placing Xenomorphs, you might want to place these obstacles in positions to where that those Xenomorphs can kind of spawn around them and be able to help you out. Because typically for first player, they want to try to hide behind these obstacles, especially if they're squadrons. But you can place these obstacles out here to where obviously, they're not going to be able to get as much benefit from these as probably as they would prefer. Because if they stay near them, monsters are going to pop out of them and start eating their squadrons. So that's the setup. Setup is second player places all the obstacles. And, then the player somehow he's got a super Star Destroyer and a Star Destroyer and a Gazanti and some squadrons out here. And the Rebel player has got, his ships coming out and his squadrons. Perfect. Okay. So, what's the special rules like? So, the special rule is actually really straightforward. If for any reason any of your ships or squadrons are missing a defense token, if they land on a rock on one of these 3 asteroid fields, even though they're taking that face-up damage card, their consolation prize is that if they have lost a defense token, they get it back. Although it comes back in the exhausted state. Remember, defense tokens have 2 states. Green being readied, red being exhausted. So, meaning that it comes back having, only one use that you can spend after you get it back. Although, if you don't spend it and you get to the next round, obviously it gets refreshed and then it's back in its ready state. So you kind of get it back. So it kind of encourages the first player that, in a pinch, if he really needs a defense token back on one of his ships, run over an asteroid field. Where can you see more of this play being useful, though, is for squadron play. The first player, if he's running aces, he's going to want to jump them on the asteroid fields there to get the defense tokens back. Now, I do want to point out, just because it says a unique squadron gets a token back, it needs to be a unique squadron that already has defensive tokens. No tossing like Saber Squadron or one of the other, like Rogue Squadron or something like that. None of the squadrons that don't have defense tokens that are unique just because they land on the asteroid field. No, they do not suddenly just get a defense token of their choice. It needs to be a squadron that already has had defense tokens and it's recovering it. Note the word there, it says recover. It doesn't just get whatever it wants. And again, you don't get any scatters back. So no scatters for ships, no scatters for squadrons. So how is this more helpful for the second player, which of course this is his objective? When one of the second player's ship's unique squadrons overlaps an asteroid field, that obstacle has no effect, and that ship or squadron may recover one of its non-scattered defensive tokens, or it may ready one of its defense tokens. So much more beneficial for the second player, especially for something like a Super Star Destroyer, where it can't start the game overlapping obstacles, but you could put a rock out in front of it, and then it just kind of moves on top of it over and over, and it can get its defensive tokens back. So for second player, this is very useful. Now, before I go on to the final part here for the Xenomorphs, I want to talk about who is this going to be most beneficial for, the special rule of recovering tokens. It's more geared towards Rebel squadrons, I'll be perfectly honest. Something like Jan Ors, who can safely sit in the back and toss out her tokens to save other squadrons, and then she's like, oh, I'm out of tokens, guess I'll just land on this asteroid field and get one of my braces back. And I do want to point out that also movements like fighter coordination teams, if so she does a regular movement and then also gets fighter coordination teamed on the rock as well, that's still considered a movement in an overlap. She can get brace after brace after brace after brace back. Also, she has intel, so like you can't prevent her from doing this. That just seems really strong. Especially also squadrons like Harris and Dula, where she only has the one brace that she usually spends pretty quickly, just flies over an asteroid field. Somebody like Lando Calrissian, whose whole gimmick is spending his brace tokens so that he can set a die to double damage. Loves this objective. He's going to love it, Lando Calrissian is. So Rebels get huge benefits from this compared to Imperials, where most of the Imperial ships, fighter squadrons, half of them have scatter, so they get no benefit. Typically, when they get targeted, they only have like 3 or 4 health, and they pretty much die before their braces are even gone. Now, this can be helpful on like double brace aces that have high health, 5, 6 health, especially more a key. But for the most part, I will say this seems a little bit biased towards rebels. That's all I'm going to get into for that. Let's get into the more juicier parts of the asteroid target tactics, the Xenogorphs. So it says here, after the start of each squadron phase, so this will not affect the first round of this because obviously they're not on the board yet. After Xenogorphs perform attacks, remove each Xenogorph obstacle from the play area. End of round. So end of round, remember in a round of Armada, you have the command phase, ship phase, squadron phase, and status phase. End of round takes place after the status phase. So the second player places the 2 Xenogorph obstacles, each touching a different obstacle. So the second player, now these 2 obstacles come to play. Remember, the Xenogorphs are still obstacles. If you are trying to shoot through them, it's still obstruction. You can still move them. For example, if you've got like Ezra Bridger, even though they may be touching another obstacle, you could move them over to touch a different obstacle or throw them out in the middle of space. That's fine. They can totally do that. But otherwise, the second player places them touching any obstacle. So, for example, you could do something like this. Now, you can only place 1 per obstacle because it says each touching a different one. So, it can't be on the same one. Can you place it, for example, where it is somehow touching 2 different obstacles? Yes, you just say it is touching this obstacle here, but you could still place it to where it is touching both. Because remember, it's a rule where when you're drawing line of sight to attack something, it can't obstruct itself, and it can't obstruct an obstacle that it is touching is not obstructed. So something to think about. All right. So both of them get placed down like so. Perfect. Okay. So now you've placed them. So it means at the start of the next squadron phase is when they now activate. Now there's a timing thing here, okay? And when it says at the start of each squadron phase, so if something shares the same timing with the first player, like for example, if the first player has a card that also says at the start of the squadron phase, the first player would resolve any of his timing for that specific timing portion before moving on to the second player, then being able to resolve the Xenogorphs. Because remember, the Xenogorphs, it says on here that at the start of each squadron phase, starting with the second player. So again, this is firmly in second player's timing window of at the start of the squadron phase. I'm not sure if there's anything that conflicts with that, but I want to make sure that I'm pointing out the timing regardless. So, and then, so at the start of the squadron phase, essentially, the Xenogorphs go off. And they're going to look around, and they want to see who they're at distance 1 of, and they're going to bite every squadron at distance 1. It doesn't matter if they're obstructed on the other side of this field here. If the Xenogorph is touching that obstacle or any obstacle, it can attack through it. Remember, the Xenogorph is treated as a ship with an anti-squadron armament of 3 blue die, so its attacks can be scattered, the attack damage can be reduced, but if it does happen to get any damage in, any hits on a target, and again, it can roll hits, if it does roll an accuracy, it can still lock defense tokens, okay, and remember, it's treated as a neutral party, no other benefits or anything can help it at all, but if it gets any damage in on a target, if it's unactivated, it gets activated. So that is bad news bears, because what's going to happen is that it's leaving that squadron unable to move or get away, and it's leaving it there for it potentially be susceptible for attacks in the following round. So anything else here that I need to cover about the Xenogorphs? So again, both the Xenogorphs in this timing, the second player chooses one of the 2. Even though he's placing them, he only can choose one of the 2 that he's going to say, I'm doing this one first, and then the first player then chooses the other one. If that one has any attacks it can make, then that one makes attacks. But again, it makes attacks against every single squadron at distance 1. His own squadrons or enemy squadrons. Yeah, so you can't get around not. You can't just say, "Oh, he chooses not to attack this target." That's not what the rulebook says. It says it attacks each squadron at distance 1. And remember, at distance 1 is something like this. This black circle being distance 1. It's just barely touching that black there. That's at distance 1. Um, Also, again, remember if a ship happens to run it over, it just takes 1 damage to any one hull zone of your choice. Okay, and so then at the end of the round, then these guys, after the squadron attacks are done, they get pulled off at the end of the squadron phase. Oh, okay, so yeah, at the start of the squadron phase, the Xenomorphs perform their attacks, then they get pulled off right after that. Immediately after that, they're gone. And then at the end of round, then the second player places both of them back down. All right. I think that pretty much covers asteroid tactics. So you can see this is a very much a beneficial objective for second player. It seems like it's really encouraging squadron play because unless the second, it still is super helpful for the second player, but it seems like squadrons can get a lot of use out of this. And of course, you've got the space slugs going around chomping at everything, and if they're able to chomp on something, if it hasn't activated, then it activates for a squadron. So this is interesting. I'm really enjoying these new objectives, but I think that's everything that we need to cover. But of course, if I missed anything, or if you feel like something is an error, please be sure to point it out. Let me know. Otherwise, I hope you guys have been enjoying these videos. If you have any requests or have any additional questions, hit me up, leave a comment here or on my YouTube channel. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe. You guys are great, and hey, I'll catch you all next time.